Hi, thank you so much for the introduction. And let me apologize from the start that I'm not here in person. While you are watching this, I'm literally over the Atlantic Ocean on a plane flying from Abu Dhabi to Philadelphia, where I live. So, once again, I apologize for the recording, but hopefully, it will contribute to the discussion that will follow the presentations in this session. Many thanks. So, the title of my presentation is The Arab City in Film Constructing Urban Imaginaries. And the presentation is very much based on a course that I've been teaching at Columbia University, GSAP, for the last 3 years or so. And I have in the past, we would look at a whole bunch of different cities in the Middle East, but I decided last year to narrow it down to the cities of Cairo and Beirut. And we are looking at, or the movies that we are interrogating in this course are 3 movies for Cairo and 2 for Beirut. In Cairo, In the Last Days of the City, directed by Tamer Saeed, Rags and Tatters, directed by Ahmed Abdallah, and Cairo Conspiracy, directed by Tariq Saleh. Whereas for Beirut, we are looking at West Beirut, directed by Ziad Doueri, and Kafr Naum, directed by Nadine Labki. And there are a whole bunch of different themes that we are looking at: nostalgia and the narrative of loss, informality and the Egyptian revolution, heritage, preservation and identity, and informal urbanism and the plight of migrants. So let me start with the movie In the Last Days of the City. And the movie depicts a protagonist, the Egyptian British actor Khaled Abdallah, who it's kind of like a semi-autobiography. He lives in downtown Cairo and is forced to vacate his apartment, and the movie is basically centered around downtown Cairo and his attempt to find this new apartment, and in the process of that, he ruminates on the city itself. And there are a number of themes that are relevant for architecture and urbanism in this particular movie. One of them is the notion of thresholds, having both a front stage in a city and a backstage. And a lot of the action that takes place in the movie are in these narrow alleyways that the actor enters, moves through, and where he encounters a sort of a different world. There's also this notion of informality, and anybody who's familiar with Cairo will know that the informal and the formal sort of overlap and are in close proximity to each other. And in the movie, there is a very sort of disturbing scene where our protagonist observes a woman being beaten by her partner on top of a rooftop. And it sort of evoked also the notion of urban palimpsests and having all these different layers on top of each other. That observation also leads to this notion of inequality and elitism. The protagonist is sort of detached from his surroundings. He observes what is around him with a kind of aloofness, but also a sense of nostalgia. And this juxtaposition between the formal and the informal also highlights notions of inequality, which is very important to understand cities in the region. And then, of course, urban violence. This movie was filmed prior to the Egyptian revolution, so it contains scenes of riots, people protesting, and these were actual scenes. And then, of course, the beating on the rooftop that I have just shown. And again, urban violence is something that characterizes a lot of urban centers in the Arab world. There's also the notion of historic preservation, and many scenes take place in downtown Cairo early in the morning when there are no people. So the filmmaker films these buildings with a kind of admiration and a nostalgia that they kind of are deteriorating because of modern conditions. So it raises the issue of what to do with these buildings. How do you preserve them while at the same time not turning the downtown area into an open museum? And then a particular interesting aspect of the movie is the soundtrack. That it's sort of throughout the movie there is this very nostalgia, romantic rhythm that pervades all these different scenes. But then there's also a discussion about the soundscape of Cairo itself. And in the movie, one of his friends asks, how do you hear silence in the midst of the noise of Cairo? So it's a very evocative statement that can, I think, raise a lot of issues about urbanism and our perception of the city itself. The second movie relating to Cairo is Rags and Tatters, or as it's called in Arabic, Farsh and Ghata. Farsh Ghata. And this movie takes us away from downtown Cairo and we enter into the fringes of the city itself, the informal city, the suburban sprawl, the slums, and so on. And the movie it takes place during the 2011 revolution, and it starts out by an actual event that occurred where prisoners were released from the prisons and escaped into different parts of the city. And our protagonist here is one of those, and he slowly makes his way to his home in the slum in Cairo, an informal neighborhood, and eventually reaches the edges of Tahrir Square where the revolution is taking place, where he meets his fate. And there are a number of urban and architectural constructs that are of importance. One of them is the notion of infrastructure. The movie starts out by the prison escape, but then our protagonist sort of encounters a desolate highway and rides in a truck to take him to his next stop. So we begin to get a sense of the infrastructure that surrounds Cairo and how you actually enter into the city. And he then approaches his neighborhood. And as you may be familiar with the revolution, that there were these checkpoints that were being set up to stop people from entering into these neighborhoods, and there is a sense of deterioration and fading grandeur. And then he moves, or his following stop is a cemetery. And again, cemeteries in Cairo, particularly the old ones, were and have been residential areas as well, where people are living, and there are street vendors that we encounter. And this raises the notion of marginalization and exclusion, and having cemeteries as a habitat. And what is so interesting about this movie as well is that there is actually hardly any dialogue. It's kind of an evocation of the notion of the voiceless, the impoverished, having no voice. And here is our protagonist sitting with a friend. They are exchanging a marijuana joint, and we see in the back smoke, which gives us an indication of the kind of upheaval that is taking place in downtown Cairo. And there are scenes in the movie that also evoke globalizing Cairo and its reconfiguration as a tourist spectacle, and the ordinary residents are merely passers-by within this urban landscape. Moving on to Beirut, there are two movies. The first one is West Beirut, directed by Ziad Qwaider, and it depicts it's from the 1976, and it depicts the events of the Civil War and how they impact three young teenagers and how they experience the upheaval that is taking place. Of course, during the Civil War, Beirut was divided into two parts. East West Beirut, which is the Muslim part, and East Beirut, the Christian part. And the green line was actually a line that was overcome with wild vegetation, and this marked the separation between these two warring factions. And of course, it evokes the notion of conflict cities, and there's a lot of literature about this, and I won't get into that. But one particular way to sort of look at this movie from an urban and architectural perspective is through the notion of terrain vague, which is a French term to describe forgotten spaces which are left behind as a result of post-industrial urbanization. So let me begin by talking about some of these terrain vagues that exist in the city of Beirut during the Civil War. And the first terrain vague is this clip that shows our young protagonist hijacking the school's microphone and then shouting revolutionary slogans. This was a French school where he went with his friends, where he was enrolled there. And of course, his French teachers were quite upset. And it's kind of a separate and distinct space from Beirut. And this is right before the events of the Civil War. Now, while this war was going on, there are all these different fascinating spaces within the city itself that could be seen as sort of separate and distinct from the chaos and the fighting that was unfolding. One of them are these residential courtyards. This is where our protagonist lives, and one of the neighbors, this woman, is quite upset about the sounds that the chicken are making, and she's imploring her neighbor to control these chicken. The other terrain vague are these checkpoints that were set up throughout the city of Beirut, controlling movement between east and west and vice versa. And these were done by all these different military factions that prevented people from moving as freely as they could. And then the soundtrack is also fascinating, and our two young protagonists frequently hang out in each other's rooms where they would smoke cigars, dance, and listen to music, in this case, 70s rock music from the movie Saturday Night Fever. So they are in their own world, separate from the fighting, away from the gaze of their parents. And then street life is also depicted quite extensively in the movie, showing a vibrant urbanity. Our young protagonist here goes to his friend the baker to get a loaf of bread, and there are elderly people who are sitting outside. So life moves on in spite all of the fighting that is taking place. Here our protagonist is taking his young female friend who is a Christian. He is a Muslim, of course, but he shows her around his neighborhood. And in the process of that, we encounter this urban vibrancy that seems to be lacking elsewhere. Mobility is also very important. It suggests a sense of freedom for our young protagonist. They are using their bike to traverse various places and urban spaces within Beirut, and in the process are discovering all sorts of interesting sites, abandoned districts, empty spaces, and one of them is a bordello where according to the madame who's in charge of this space, the rules of Beirut do not apply. This is her own place. Anybody is welcome here. Muslim, Christian, Maronite, Palestinian, Israeli, whoever. That this is something different and distinct from the rest of Beirut. In one of the final scenes of the movie, we see our protagonist with his father in another kind of terrain vague, a balcony, the balcony of their apartment. They're looking at the street, they're seeing all this military troop movement. And our protagonist asks his father, "Why don't you just leave?" And his father tells him that I've been living here all my life and I will not leave at all. This is my place. And this obviously tells us a lot about identity and belonging and so on. The final movie is Capernaum or Capernaum by Nadine Labki, and the movie depicts the plight of a young Syrian refugee a young Lebanese uh, uh, kid who lives with his parents in one of the many slums that exist within Beirut. And it shows us a side of Beirut that many people do not really associate with the city. It's a city of glamour and so on, but it's a counter to that. And I've conceptualized that by using the concept of heterotopias, which was introduced by Michel Foucault. Heterotopias are disruptive, unsettling, disturbing, challenging, and so on. And there are a bunch of different heterotopias that are depicted in this movie. One of them is the slum where our protagonist lives. That's right in the center of Beirut. And this is where a lot of the action takes place. But there are different heterotopias. For example, the central prison, where families in the street shout out to their relatives who are in prison, asking about their well being. The apartment where our protagonist lives is claustrophobic, it is chaotic, it is contrasted with street life. So, and when it comes to street life, there are all these different vendors, young children selling all sorts of things. It evokes notions of informal urbanity. They are inserted into the formal city, but they are also invisible. The rooftop represents a kind of escape for our protagonist here. Zain is with his sister Sahar. They overlook the glamorous skyline of Beirut, all the while dreaming about escaping these dreary conditions. Ultimately, Zain leaves his family, he abandons them, and begins a journey that takes him through various parts of the city, and ultimately he leaves the entire city. It starts out by Luna Park, which is a theme park that actually exists within Beirut. It suggests notions of utopia, dystopia, playfulness, a kind of escape from the harsh conditions that our kid has experienced. While he is in that park, he meets an Ethiopian migrant worker who lives in an informal shack that exists on the margins of Beirut. She takes in Zain and she asks him to take care of her young kid, a baby, while she is at work. So Zain sort of follows these instructions and takes the kid to an informal market that actually exists in Beirut, Souq al-Ahad, which is under an overpass. And it also evokes, it's a heterotopia. It is a representative of interstitial and liminal spaces. It is hidden and invisible, but there are also a lot of illicit activities that take place. And one of them is this shopkeeper who's trying to convince Zain to sell this kid so he can sell it to a wealthy Lebanese family who are looking to adopt a child. Zain doesn't, of course, follow through on that, and he takes the kid on this makeshift wagon, traversing through the city. Zain meets other young kids, and they're all dreaming about escaping Beirut, heading to Europe, where life, according to them, is much, much better. There are also notions of voyeurism and exploitation, such as this Christian missionary group singing and dancing in front of migrant workers who have been incarcerated. The final scene in the movie shows Zain for the first time smiling. He was granted asylum and he is on his way to leaving the city, which for many residents in the urban centers in the Arab world is perhaps their last recourse for a decent life. In conclusion, just a few observations. Through this course, I was trying to develop a broader understanding about how our perception of Arab cities is influenced by cinematic accounts. It highlights the significance of subjective experiences and their impact on design and planning decisions. And lastly, it allows us to appreciate the extent by which such accounts can undermine, subvert official narratives pertaining to urban policies in the region. And thank you very much for listening.
Hello, Khartoum. I assume you can see that. So if you can, great. If not, this is going to be a very awkward presentation. Um, but it's really a pleasure to be with you. If you told me even 3 months ago that I would be speaking to a group based in Khartoum, Sudan, about architecture and film, I would have been extremely surprised. But it is a real pleasure. Um, and it's been really interesting listening to all of the other panelists. And I think if there's one thing we share, it seems like a sense that um, film really does have a significant impact on the way we understand the built world around us. I think that's really interesting, and in a sense, that's the sort of root of my course. Um, so I'll start out telling you a little bit about me, which is I grew up in New York City um, in the 1970s. And really, I think of New York in that period really shaped on cinema, on film, in movies, by particularly by two filmmakers, Woody Allen and Martin Scorsese. And what I think is so interesting and what I learned growing up was that there, and what also shapes the way I teach architecture now, architecture and film now, is that there could be two such incredibly divergent ways of looking at the same place. So you can see here on the left, Woody Allen's poster for his film Manhattan. And in the films of Woody Allen in this period, New York City is depicted in these very honeyed tones. This film was actually in black and white, so very romantic, nostalgic vision of a very beautiful, uh, almost magical city, very comfortable, much of it shot on the Upper East Side. So here you have this picture of the Queensboro Bridge, and it's two lovers looking out on it. Couldn't be a more romantic vision of the city. And of course, that was mostly the city I knew growing up in. Modest privilege on the Upper East Side, so the same neighborhood was very familiar to me and spoke to me. At the same time, we have Martin Scorsese, literally at the same time, shooting Taxi Driver, which has such a vastly, vastly different way of looking at New York. New York in Scorsese's films is dangerous, crime-infested, sordid, uh, rough, tough, violent place. And the truth was that this also reflected my experience of the city growing up at that time. I wasn't really a victim of this kind of crime, and but I was very well aware of danger. You couldn't be a kid in New York or anybody in New York and travel around and not also understand uh, that the city was a dangerous, troubled place. It was, going bankrupt at that time, practically at odds with the federal government. Famously, Gerald Ford declining to support the city financially at its most needy moment. Um, so these two, this idea of dichotomy, of divergent voices being able to see different things in the same place really interested me. And in a way, it's shaped the way I teach architecture and film to this day, often using comparison and looking at multiple films on the same place or on the same subject to sort of draw out students and get them thinking about different themes and issues. Um, as as was noted, um, uh, I was the editor this back when 20 years ago now. It's kind of terrifying to think about that because it seems still fresh that I edited this collection um, for Princeton Architectural Press, where I was then an editor. And the real premise around this book was that architecture and film are these conjoined disciplines, very similar. They're both a combination of, excuse me, they're both combination of art and craft. They are usually, or almost always, uh, there is a leading figure responsible for producing them, the architect, the director. That individual gets the overwhelming share of credit for this project. It's usually a man. Um, when in fact, each of both film and architecture are the products of a extremely large number of craftsmen and uh, individuals, working together to create something that in the end, after a very long period of time, both take, the disciplines take a great long time to produce, and they produce something that is really an object that you experience spatially and in time. Of course, film, it's two-dimensional. In architecture, it's three-dimensional, but really, I think both cases, it's time that we and space that are the principal ways we uh, intake these disciplines. So on the cover of the book, one of my favorite films on architecture and film. This is from Mr. Blandings Builds His Dream House, in which Cary Grant and Merloy play New Yorkers who decide to move to their dream house in the suburbs. And of course, it turns into a complete disaster trying to rehabilitate this old house. They practically go broke and end up moving back to the city. It was actually remade in the 80s. It's been remade several times and made in the 80s with Tom Hanks and Shelley Long. Not a great film, the remake. But the book here was really about looking at architecture in a variety of themes that draw together architecture and film. Uh, so, for example, how the presentation of the architectural profession on screen has shaped the discipline. There are essays on a variety of auteur filmmakers. Tati, Antonioni. There are essays by film editors, by a location scout, all of these sort of disciplines that one doesn't necessarily think about, but help shape uh, a film. So I wanted to sort of explore all of those themes, and that sort of thematic approach is what I bring to the classroom now. But as I'm teaching films, I'm both showing them and I'm also asking students to produce films throughout the course. So they're thinking about films, and of course now everybody has a camera in their pocket with a smartphone that we think about how they can make films. And that sort of strategy started in the middle of the pandemic. Um, when sort of all of a sudden everybody had these film cameras that were really capable of good video. And also I thought it was a way for students to document this incredibly odd moment in their lives where they're sort of trapped indoors. So we started exploring that through film. And since then, we've moved on to just having the students explore whatever kind of film they want to make. Some make documentaries, some make fictional films. It's really up to them. Um, so one of the themes I principally discuss, and I think is extremely important, is how the profession of architecture is depicted in film. And so this is probably remains until perhaps today the single most famous film about architecture, qua architecture, and about the architect. Of course, it's The Fountainhead, the 1949 film from King Vidor, based on a book by Ayn Rand. Terrible book. Frankly, the ideas in the movie are kind of repugnant. So Gary Cooper, who you see here, plays a modernist architect who is so egotistical and moral that he refuses to have make any compromise whatsoever in his architecture. And here you can see he has produced this very clean modernist skyscraper. And what he's pulling off now is a sort of classical facade that his clients have stuck on it because they're scared by his modernism, and he is appalled and quits the project. And in fact, the sort of film's ultimate sequence is when uh, uh, Cooper designs, or Howard Rourke, his character, designs this housing project, and when it is not built to his exact specifications, he goes and dynamites it, blows it up, which today sounds like an act of domestic terrorism, but in the world of the film, it is depicted as a sort of act of moral, justified righteousness. Um, and I think this has very much shaped this idea of what architecture is in the public, that it's the product of great men who are uncompromising and build works of genius, which of course is not really how the world works. What's interesting to me is that uh, this has really remained the way I think film, and perhaps the public as well, understands architecture. And two films released just in the past 6 months, and one of them just last week nominated for an Oscar, The Brutalist by Bradley Corbett, which you can see here on the left, and a still from Megalopolis by Francis Ford Coppola. Here we see Bradley Corbett's film and uh, Francis Ford Coppola's film, both really about these sort of lone male geniuses who are rude to have anyone else address discuss their film. Or I mean, there are architects who refuse to have make any compromise in their architecture. I think it's still the way people understand the film. Some other films we look at documentaries. Here, one by the Maysles brothers called Concert of Wills. Really, their films are so interesting because they're all filmed in a cinema verite style. We compare that to the documentary by Nathaniel Kahn on his father, Louis Kahn, his sort of search to understand his father. Um, uh, the Battle of Algiers, the Gillo Pontecorvo film, contrast with Do the Right Thing. So both sort of about the contested city and how they're depicted on screen, just rushing through dystopia versus utopia. I love the Chris Marker's film La Jetée, very interesting way of looking at the city versus the Truman Show by Peter Weir, which is very, very relevant with its sort of emphasis on uh, how technology and utopia collide. And look a great deal at the films of Jacques Tati, sort of the master of understanding, of thinking about modernism in the context of film. Here you have his character, Mr. Hulot, the sort of uh, figure out of tradition who's confronted with modernism, and the sort of battle between modernism, or battle, this sort of contrast, dichotomy between the traditional city and modernism is sort of the theme of his work, and very humane and humanistic way of understanding these. And of course, as noted, have my students make these films. And this is a poster for one about a cat that lives in the library of the Harvard Graduate School of Design. Another really fabulous film made by a student about a planning document in Los Angeles. And you can see some stills from that film about a plan to remake a part of East Los Angeles. So that's my strategies for teaching architecture and film. Sorry to go a little bit over here, but it was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you for Modern Sudan Collective and Docomomo Sudan. I'm very proud to be here. I'm going to share my presentation and starting just now. My presentation is related as the film and the modern city, as you know. It's a promise. I'm going to talk about four films, 3 documentaries and 1 fiction film. The first one is a documentary, Santiago 1930, that starts showing the contrast in between the old and the new of the city. As a kind of movie that shows so many cities at that time. You probably can relate this documentary with Berlin, the Symphonie das Großstadt from Walter Ruttmann from 1927, or Sao Paulo, a Sinfonia da Metropole from 1929. Santiago was the film mostly shows the city during the 30 years, the relation with the old city and the urban tissue of the squares from the Spanish foundation and the colonial construction, with mostly were still there in the 30s. It shows also the new dynamics of the city by mobility and social infrastructure, but mostly shows the construction of the new city, of course, in relation with the possibilities of the colonial grid and the urban form generated on it. It shows the construction works for the tall buildings that appear in the city center, and mostly related with the massive concrete construction because of the earthquakes regulation that start in 1929. The main idea of the film is relate the city with the progress and a kind of celebration of the new bourgeois city and the urban projects. Also, the visual resources are very interesting. The low angles, the blurs of the overlays, as you can see here, are very important to this kind of presentation of the movement in the film. Also related with some kind of scenes promoted by the American avant-garde on photography that were pretty known in the film scene here in Santiago. The second one is the 18-minute film by Jules Bryan, made for the Office of the Coordinator of Inter-American Affairs in 1943. It was entitled Housing in Chile, One Government's Plan to Provide Better Homes. Jules Bryan had been widely recognized as a documentary filmmaker for his filming of the Warsaw Ghetto and the Nazi invasion of 1939, and was approached to make a series of films that would bring the situation in Latin America closer to the North American public within the framework of the Good Neighbor policy, which was being reestablished with greater resource at the outbreak of the Second World War. As you may know, Roosevelt created in August of 1940 the Office of Inter-American Affairs, and he created also a specific section, the Motion Picture Division, to show the Latin American themes to the American public. Housing in Chile began with the presentation of the urban development aspects of Santiago. The aspect of Santiago with a series of general view of the city, and shows also the San Eugenio housing and Vivaceta population, among others. This is the main issue I can represent here. It's also presented the state of the city from the point of view of health, the effort made to combat tuberculosis, assigned responsibility to inadequate forms of housing represented by slum and popular settlements, because like all cities, Santiago still has slums, said the voice in off. To understand what was done, to understand what was done at that time, to correct the situation, the director invited us to spend some more time with the typical Chilean family, composed by the father, Manuel, the mother, Teresa, and three children, Patricio, Juanita, and Dolores. The names were very familiar and common at that time. Manuel worked in the center of the city and had to make a long trip by public transportation to get to his house located in a tenement in which the daily life of the family was shown, and where Teresa did her best to cope with life where the children spend the whole day at home. But something could be done, said the voice in off, to overcome the situation. The Blanco family applied for a housing at the official institution for housing, and the family would later receive a visit from a social worker to determine the living conditions and select one of the houses from these plans, and they move to a new neighborhood. The Blanco would have the happiest day of their life when they received the news of their acceptance, and of course they went to the Vivaceta neighborhood in the northern sector of Santiago. The house, the housing in Chile shows the way of building the new city by neighborhoods, units in low density, from 2 to 3 or 4 floors only, with the facilities to have a good life in it. The final sentence were more than positive, and I quote, "Everything is designed in Chile so that the workers have access to space, light, and air. Good housing, Chile believes, is the best and most permanent social investment that pays dividends in the healthier, and happier people." The next film is one film named Santiago Jumps to the Future. It was documentary that intends to show the difference in between disorder and urban order and the necessity of action. It was promoted by the Christian Democrat administration before Salvador Allende during the late 60s, and showed the process of modernization that the city needs at that time, and the efforts of the public policies developed by the official institutions. The narrative is quite clear. The new needs provoke new actions. Start with the demolitions. You can understand it's quite opposite to the documentary of the 30s. The new urban complexes like the San Borja urban renewal in 1968, and show the disparity between the disorder of the planet city, and the order of the planet city. The new infrastructures for moving, mostly the new ways and the tall buildings that they improve in these urban renewal plans. But also the tunnels and the roads that made the circulation easier. Oops, sorry. The film presents the contradiction between the sprawl of the city, of the peripheries promoted by the roads, and the promotion of more buildings and population density in the void areas that still were present in the center of the city, or the old and obsolete assemblies that need to be removed to give a space for a new and tall city. We are seeing now the Villa Frey. It was a neighborhood unit, one of the best housing complex built in Chile, now national monument, that gives the population new wave of life according times. The last one is a fictional film named Kalugo Menta, started in the end of 1990, and shows the situation of a group of young people living in the terrain back of a place that was built as housing complex during the dictatorship. It was built with blocks in the periphery of the city, so far away from the city center, and shows some objects spread around the place. And the main discourse is related to the wasteland and abandon that the housing complex were having at that moment. It is, of course, kind of the second argument, the second narrative of the film, which has a main protagonist, a young man who is every time doing nothing in the middle of the void. And with this 5 or 6 friends. This is it is Santa Olga neighborhood built during the last time of the dictatorship, with this kind of serial blocks to build all over the cities along the country. And it was, of course, in this wasteland, which was intended to be the public place for the people. It's very nice because the film ends at the moment that some people from the municipality came to visit the place, and ask at that moment to the guys were doing nothing, that they said at that place, and said, well, what are you doing here? And they said, we are only waiting for the grass. Of course, they are waiting for the implementation of the main place of the housing units. All these films show us a very interesting situation. You can see the main construction of the city center and how it went, the situation to the sprawl. Santiago is at this moment 8 million people, and the sprawl of the city is one of the main urban problems at this moment. Thank you so much.
So let's see, I guess good morning or good afternoon to everyone. And I guess before sort of diving into the presentation, I just want to take a moment and thank, I guess, the talented 3D modeling team behind the initiative that we've been working on here at MSc. The dedication that they've, I guess, given has been instrumental in documenting and preserving Sudan's, I guess, cinematic heritage. So, and I guess just briefly, the project or the group began as sort of an offshoot of a project I had been working on last spring, exploring the presidential palace. But we've, I guess, now expanded. Let's see. And so, if anything, we began sort of documenting more general landmarks, but I guess with the conference, we were like, let's sort of begin to focus our scope to cinema spaces. As they're not just buildings, but they're, spaces of social exchange, artistic expression. And so the work began with a range of cinemas from Coliseum, Blue Nile, Thawra, Safia, Halfaya, Al-Wahda, which we'll hear about soon, as well as Coliseum, and Nilan, Friendship Hall, and Sanja Cinema. But I just want to bring up, there's been, I guess, a major obstacle, and I feel like we're dealing with this sort of in general, but it's a sort of centralized focus on Khartoum and documenting Sudanese architecture. I mean, the capital does hold many significant sites, but Sudan's architectural heritage expands beyond, I guess, as you can kind of see from this map, I guess kind of looking at, okay, where are the other cinemas, let's say in Sudan? And I guess also at the same time, we want to kind of acknowledge the sort of decline that we've seen in cinema spaces, as well as the sort of importance or the reason why, let's say, we are trying to document these spaces. As we've seen, I guess, decline from both social and political pressures that I guess are kind of leaving cinemas, as we can see from Sinja Cinema, in which they're kind of laid to ruin, but then also the sort of I guess, more immediate challenges we've been facing with the ongoing war. As we can see, these spaces are at, risk of destruction. And I guess moving ahead, although, you'll hear more about this process from, I guess, Rawya and Hiba. I guess one of our primary goals is to actually hold some sort of physical exhibition, not only using some of the more conventional drawings we've made, but also how do we integrate, alternative forms of media, including animations, audio, immersive visuals. And at the same time, we're, I guess, working towards creating some sort of open source online archive in which, individuals are able to sort of access the drawings, the models we've produced, to both learn and contribute from Sudanese architectural heritage. And so I guess so far, these are just some of the few cinemas that we've documented. We thought it would be nice to kind of showcase them, at least in like a similar view, to begin to see, I guess, the sort of similarities and differences, as I guess we're now trying to thread some sort of theme between these different cinema spaces. And so I guess now we'll begin with the Wahda Cinema, and then Nilan from Rawya.
Hello everyone, I am Rawya Mohamed. I'm going to talk about Al-Wahda and Nilan Cinema. First of all, الوحدة Cinema. It is located in Khartoum North, Kober, also known as Kober Cinema. And it was constructed by Jafar Quresh and others with a capacity of 2,500 seats. Also, it was one of the active cinemas in the past, and unfortunately, it was closed and shut down and abandoned. As for the BIM process, we started by taking the satellite images for the cinemas, which guided me and other team to take an approximate measurement of the cinema as well as the components of the building. It was a 2D level until we get the help from the exterior images and the interior also to get the information to build the 3D model. Then this is the components of the cinemas from other resources that we also documented, Al Safi Cinema and Coliseum Cinema. We here sort of the same layout for most of the cinemas. In the side plan of the cinema, we can see that the layout is kind of similar. It starts from there's the stages and there's the front of the screen and then the balcony. Also, the location of the staircases is going to be in the these highlighted squares. And then in the section, we kind of see the levels that we were talking about. The front of the seat, the front of the screen is the 3rd degree, and then the 2nd degree, and then the balcony, the 1st degree. And then here we created the rendering for the models to get as much details as possible for the textures and the details on the models itself by Lumion. Then we get to Nilan Cinema. It is located in Khartoum South, Dam, and it is the last cinema in the south at that time. It was popular also and has a capacity of 3,000 seats. Ownership by Sanusi Hussein and other Sudanese who bought it from Mr. Lucas Al-Khawaja or the founder, and established in 1962. Okay, the site plan of Nilan Cinema, it's kinda here we see the similarities in the layout, the same components of the stages and the balconies. And then in the sections, we can see the layout clearly, and the entrances always being in the main elevation of the buildings. Then we here, by using Lumion, we created the details on the models as well. And lastly, for the elevations, from this image, I could kind of see how similar in layout, but also different in architecture styles. The Wahda Cinema is more of a modern style that has the clear features of the concrete using and the paneling, and then the use of the brick finishes, while the Nilan Cinema is more a vernacular architectural type. There is the screen ornament and the windows using for more complex and in details. Yeah.
I guess also at the same time, with the sort of BIM process, there had also been this, I guess, forensic exploration using LiDAR. And with that, it began, let's say, extracting, let's say, 3D information from just single images. And it's this sort of process where, you kind of take the frame of I guess, the camera, and it's this, almost like, where is what kind of almost like Sherlock Holmesy process of, let's say, retracing the steps of the images to then, I guess, create some sort of I guess spatial model or even narrative, let's say, I guess by collecting sort of images from different times that were then, let's say, once scattered. and it's, I guess, the use of these two softwares, or I guess one is more of a model or script, and then the other is a software, Zoe Depth and Cloud Compare. But I guess also at the same time, we were sort of interested in, I guess, once we have this information, how do we, I guess, kind of begin to bring these, I guess, models in, I guess, to life, as a way to sort of, let's say, occupy these spaces. And I guess with that, and I'd say sort of the, I guess one of the more remarkable aspects of this was the fact that, we were able to, I guess, three-dimensionally recreate these cinema spaces by just using, a handful of images that have been, I guess, pulled from, let's say, social media, YouTube, archives when possible. And I guess as you can see from these two animations, I guess the sort of dissective process being done by one of our MSc modeling team members, Remaz Bashir. But I guess to sort of, I guess, go more into this sort of analysis process with point cloud software, I guess we'll have Hiba now discuss Coliseum Cinema.
Yes, hello everyone. I'll be discussing Coliseum Cinema. Could we go to the next slide, please? Yeah, established in the 30s, Coliseum Cinema was one of the earliest cinemas in Sudan, constructed during colonial period, located in Al Qasr Avenue, known at the time as Victoria Avenue, and owned by Emmanuel Lucas, a Greek businessman who owned most of the commercial cinemas in Sudan during pre-independence time, including Nilan Cinema. Okay, it was opened. It was an open-air cinema. Could we go back, Omer? Sorry. It was an open-air cinema. Yeah, it was an open-air cinema targeting foreign entities at the time in Sudan, which was reflected, as we can see here, in the style of the cinema as an European architectural style, classic style. So go to the next slide, please. So in the process of documenting the cinema, we aim to capture their development, changes, and transformation rather than focusing on a static moment of time. So in doing that, we were able to sort of recognize minor changes in the cinema and trying to relate that to changes in social or political or environmental changes in Sudan. So if we could see here highlighted, here the change here, the sort of a canopy appeared here, and then during the 40s, and then here during the 60s, the appearance of Arabic calligraphy as well as English. We could type. Yes, okay. So as mentioned in a previous session, architecture and the built environment are impacted by external forces and social and economical changes. And through that, we were as I mentioned before, we were able to connect the changes to and the physical form of the building to sort of social changes, as we can see here during colonial eras. The only American and European films were shown, and then after the cinema became more popularized after independence, and Sudanese became and frequented by Sudanese population, came the introduction of Arabic movies and films, and then the Arabic signs in the building. So yeah, here we put them together to try and connect all of that as well. So if we could move past that. Okay, so during the 60s and the 70s, the cinema was reconstructed by Sudanese architectural firm, Carlplan Consultant. The cinema was designed by Ahmed Aboud and Abdel Wahab Abdel Rahman. So as we can see here, the complete opposite of what was of the old cinema. Contrary to old cinema, the new cinema was built in a modern style, a style that dominated the architectural scene in Sudan post-colonial, in the post-colonial era up to the 80s. Here as well, we were trying, go to the next, please. Here as well, we were trying to capture the changes in the building through the point cloud model and link the change to historical events happening during that period. So if we can see here at the first, we see the signage and then after the building was neglected during الإنقاذ or as the ban of the cinemas happened during the late 80s. Here we can see the cinema abandoned and then or the neglect was seen in the facade here. And then during after that, it was rebuilt. Here we can see the change in the windows and then on this facade, and then it was transformed into a bank, as we can see here. Next, please. Yeah, so as we are trying to connect the narrative of the cinema and changes happening in the cinema, we are trying to connect it to the social changes and political in Sudan at that time. So yeah, here we can see the cinema as a movie theater. And then during the time when the cinema was neglected in the late 80s, and then used by the public in sort of like sitat chai or a public gathering space, and then after that when it was turned into a bank. So yeah, this is of a sort of a collection to link the transformation in architecture and the transformation in the social political environment in Sudan. Moving forward. So also we were trying to capture the changes not only in the facade but also in other spaces, as we can see here, from a movie theater to a garage, if we can see in the last image. And next, please. Yeah, here also in the interior, as we can see, during the using time of the cinema and its destruction, and then it was turned into a bank. Moving forward, please. So yeah, here is like an overview of the timeline of the cinema and the pivotal moment in the lifetime of it. Next, please. Yeah, lastly, because as shown before, there was a lack of images, so we are not we did not being able to cover all the cinema during all times. So we were trying to sort of translate that into a BIM model rather than a total point cloud model. If you could, yeah. So thank you, everybody. And thank you for making it so far with us. And thank you. Yeah.